Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're very excited to have you here and to discuss the topic of how we can optimize, starting with the viewer in mind. And this is really close to our heart because this is where SSIMWAVE can make a significant difference. And just think about this. Just remember a moment when you watch a film, and it's a moment that you would never forget. Could be that you remember Darth Vader telling Luke Skywalker that his dad, or The Matrix, where Neo had to pick the red pill or the blue pill, or any other film that was really memorable for you. Remember that moment and remember when you watch it. And imagine that you are watching it at home and how it's important to feel those emotions. And you can also think about a sport event, a football game. And a football game could be this very moment when your team, the game is about to end, your team, they're tied, and then someone scores this goal. And you could look at the faces of the players and you can see it's like the moment, like stop in time. And imagine that you are watching this game and the emotions you are feeling. And imagine that all of a sudden the quality you get to your viewers is not the one that transmits those emotions. Then the viewer would be frustrated. They would be angry because they didn't feel the emotion, they didn't live the moment. Obviously, for the video distributor, the aggregator, the MVPD, it's a big problem because customers would be dissatisfied. For the content creators, it would be as well. People that place their ads also would be problematic. So at the end of the day, this feeling is what is important. And what is critical is the viewer. How do we get those experiences to the viewer? And how do we deliver those emotions in a way that is efficient cost-wise, and efficient also in the way that we can control how everything's processed so we deliver it successfully. So when you think about this, you would think that there's very simple content and there's very complex content. So the simple content is really very, very stable type of kind of images that they don't have too much movement. So when you're processing, when you're compressing, is very simple to deliver. And in those cases, you would see in these regions, these are curves, and each of the curves with one of the colors is one asset or one video. And basically what these curves mean is in the y-axis, you have the quality, and in the x-axis, you have the bit rate. So basically what you see here is that in some of these cases, for instance, this blue line, you have at a low bit rate, you have low quality. And when you start increasing the bit rate, the quality increases, but then it slows how it's increasing the quality with the bit rate. And if you look at these top lines, what you see is that initially with the increase of bit rate, you have a pretty high level of increase of quality, but then it plateaus, and then you start having what we call diminishing returns. So basically the theory is once you increase the bit rate to an extent, the quality gets better. But then in a moment of time, it doesn't matter how much you increase that bit rate, the benefit is not going to be perceived. So in this case, you have, in this area, you have the assets that are very low bit rate, less than 1 megabit per second, you have a very high quality, over 80. And on this side, you have the assets that even have very high or a significantly higher bit rates, you have still pretty low quality, like on the 60s. This is something, 60 would be something that would bother your viewer. So that is what characterizes the simple content versus the complex content. You really want to treat them different, but there's limitations right now. And when you see how often gets processed, it gets processed the same way. And the idea of many service like providers is that they select bit rate where they can ensure that there's a decent quality for everything. But as you can imagine, you are missing on the opportunity of delivering this type of content at a lower bit rate. And if you could reach 80 or 90 at less than 1 megabit per second. Why? Using 6 megabits per second. So it is very inefficient, and there's obviously a big opportunity to deliver it. But it's not only the cost efficiency. Like when you see this scenario, you are transmitting this video, and then you have 8.5 megabits per second. Then in many countries of the world, or in many network conditions, or if you are talking rural areas or islands, then you may have player issues. Why? Because you're causing congestion. So if you could deliver this video at 1 megabit per second, and you are taking 8.5 times the capacity in the delivery networks that you would need to deliver, basically you are creating kind of artificially congestion. And that congestion could obviously would affect your buffering and other player and network issues, and therefore you're more likely to have delivery problems, would basically create frustration on the viewer, but also it would cost you much more money. So here is kind of you're spending more money, and then you are not necessarily improving the quality. Now you have the other scenario where you deliver it in a very low bit rate. So obviously when according to our curves, when you have that lower bit rate, then you are likely to have poor quality, and you are going to see these type of situations when the encoding have issues. You have blockiness or micro blocking, and at the end of the day, the customer is going to be again dissatisfied. And in those both scenarios, you are losing customers, or losing customer satisfaction, losing money, and in many cases both. So how can you cut that circle on that? Basically, you have to make that choice, which at the end of the day may not give you the winning formula. And when you look at how is making all these decisions, it's really as easy to get it wrong as to get it right if you are not having the solution to understand how to measure that quality and how to manage it. Why? Because if you have different content types, different resolutions, frame rates, dynamic ranges, bit rates, encoder standards, and device types, then the combination is 500,000 permutations here. So if you would normally plan to do this with a subjective assessment and watching the videos yourself, you're going to be limited to the scale you can deliver. And basically, this is not going to give you the opportunity to review the content, and likely you're going to have bad assets that just go through your workflow and hit the customer. And that is a very significant cost in customer satisfaction, churn, viewership, that obviously we all want to avoid. Now, so this is a current approach, and at the end of the day, what's happening is that you would have problems with scaling because it's very hard to do this manually. You would probably have operation inefficiencies because you have a bad video that hits the customer calls technical support, you try to figure out what happened, and you don't have the tools to know where it happened. And also you have functions within the workflow that basically are defined to use all the resources they can to do the best job possible, which is fine, but have their issues. So when you're coding on when the player is playing the content, the player would always try to get the highest rendition, the highest resolution version of that video, because it is assumed that by taking the best one, you're going to have the best possible experience. But that doesn't necessarily happen, as we saw with the example of using a very high bit rate for a network that may have congestion. Also, you would have variation in experience, and there is the limitation that in order to make decisions, you are using metrics that use the network conditions as a proxy for quality, you would have the risk that you are not catching many things. At the end of the day, the only judge, the only one that measured experience and who knows the satisfaction is the viewer himself or herself. And therefore, if you cannot measure in the same way that the customer would view with pixels and frames and understanding how that content is experienced, then you are likely going to have a very limited view of what the problem is. And therefore, you're not going to have control of your experience. Now, on the other hand, the future state is that with a solution that can give you perceptual quality, like SSIMWAVE solution, you can measure the real viewer experience. You can automate it and you can view it at scale. So basically what you can do is make your workflow simpler, make very quick decisions in real time, and scale it to a very large number of assets. You can control the experience and the quality at every single point of the workflow and allocate resources in a need-based basis. So basically what this means is when you have an 80 with a 1 megabit per second, just because the asset is very simple, well, why allocating 8 or 6? So allocate 1, and then when you have more complex assets, then you allocate a different bit rate. And you can also adapt it to the device. The viewing device, you don't need to deliver the same quality to a 72-inch TV that would be for a cell phone or for a tablet, and also for network conditions. We all know that although in large metropolitan areas, you may have fiber to the home, or you may have 5G, then in other areas, you may have some more limited network conditions in islands, in rural areas, or in congested wireless networks. And you want to make sure that you have the quality that you need at the bit rate that allows those networks to carry that content successfully. And at the end of the day, what you need to do is to target the viewer experience. The viewer experience should be the goal on what gives the best customer satisfaction at a reasonable cost. So it should be what is selected and what is the base for the decision making, not the consequence. So at the end of the day, we can move, like if you're frustrated by having to pick between quality and cost, as Neil was at the Matrix, like how do you expand this to not be a zero-sum game, or I have to pick one or the other? And the answer is you can pick consistent quality of demand, and you have the control when you can decide what the right balance is. So here you see the scale at the left, and then you can select where this line is. This line may be different for every service provider or content provider, because you can find what is the perfect conditions for your content in your market, in your network conditions. And what happens normally is that if you are delivering content at a lower rate, basically what the customers experience is a lack of quality and poor customer satisfaction, higher churn, impact on ad revenue and viewers, subscriptions, and also operational costs on trying to find problems on support calls, etc. And then to an extent, depending on what the quality you select, you may want to assess on what bit rate do you want to use for the assets that are simpler, or that they don't need the amount of resources that you would allocate for the most complex ones. So if you look from this perspective, when you are below the line, you're very likely losing viewers, ad revenue, you're increasing the churn, but at the end of the day, you're losing money on customers. And when you are high on this line, you are wasting money on bitrate that the viewer is not valuing. So when you find the optimal balance and you have a solution that helps you kind of fine-tune your content to that balance, then you avoid the situation of either losing money or losing customers. And that is really where you evolve from having to pick one versus the other to having full control, like what we're seeing here. You can use the simplest viewer score to select the quality you want, and then to adapt the bit rate to the conditions. And in that way, you can control the experience and save both bits and money. But also, it is very interesting that by making decisions on what normally would not, like if you don't have control on the delivery network, for instance, you can still influence it. And you can influence it by delivering the same quality with a lower bit rate. Because by reducing the bit rate, as we mentioned before, you reduce the load on distribution networks. And in consequence, you are much more likely to have a better quality under better network conditions. And you are not pretty much clogging your network. I think we all saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic, some countries and some regions of the world, the regulator requested for some of the content suppliers and direct-to-consumer companies to reduce the bit rate in order to avoid creating issues in the networks. So yes, you can obviously remove the higher profile on your ABR ladder, but you can also make better decisions than that, and you can adjust with the viewer score a better quality score, not affecting the customer experience by reducing or removing a profile, but you can tune it to have the best possible quality with the lower possible bit rate. Now you can do that while also monitoring how the quality really evolves all across the workflow. And you would see that in this graphic, we start with the viewer. And that is because this is how it works with the viewer intelligence platform and the SSIMWAVE viewer score. The viewer is the start. And when you understand and you measure everything from the viewer perspective, then you can plan how you set up your workflow and your value chain in a way that you deliver that content in the most efficient way. And the way the solution works is that we have probes that go into the value chain, and it's a software solution. They capture all the information they need to measure the quality score, and it is aggregated in the cloud in the viewer intelligence platform. And it can measure the most difficult challenges that are in the industry, including macro blocking, included audio video sync, included distributed latency, video freeze, banding. So since the solution was designed based on how the human visual system works, it is not limited by just whether there are network conditions that trigger an alarm. It is like measuring, like if you would be watching every asset, every point, at every minute to make sure that the quality is present all the times. And the best thing is that the way it integrates with your current solution, it's very transparent. So what we would have here is that if you have your workflow, you have your encoder, and today you have the source content coming in, and you have your current encoder configuration. So what you can do is adding an intelligence layer in the workflow, and then you can define as a third variable what is the target simplest score. Remember, we start from the simplest score and we basically tune up to make sure that we deliver it. And then the simplest score and the solution helps you layer it with the eyes and the brain to measure that quality, to make sure that the right decisions and the right configurations get to the encoder so you can have the optimal ABR ladder. So it's efficient, it replicates how the human visual system works. It is a software solution that works all across the workflow, and it can be very transparently implemented as a layer over the encoder. And basically, you don't need to change the solution you have in-house, and you can get to those levels of savings. And when you look at the results that we can produce are really exciting. So as you remember, our score is linear from 0 to 100. So in some of the measurements we have done, we use the baseline for comparison of 5.8 megabits per second. And if you select these 4 levels of quality, which would be 75, 80, 85, and 90, then you could have these level of savings. So what this means is that if today you deliver this content at 5.8 megabits per second, we can provide you 68% savings or reduction in bitrate and therefore savings at a 75, which is a pretty good quality, or you can reach 62% with a target 80 score, and so on. So basically, the solution can be tuned for whatever score you want, and in any of them, you can see the tremendous levels of savings that you could reach. And remember, this is by selecting the quality you want, and also this reduction would generate even better quality for the user by avoiding rebuffering and network issues, and provide you the best of both worlds. Is better video at a lower cost. So you have consistent quality like any other solution. You have 60% savings on top of any other solution in the market. It is encoder agnostic, no need to change anything on your workflow. It's scalable, and you can reduce cost congestion and provide a consistent quality for customers. So it's really a very exciting solution that it's helping customers to do more with less and to be more efficient. And now you can deliver this. You can deliver this in the conditions you want. You can have your customer happy. They are back to having the emotions and to be part of the game as if they would be at the stadium, that today, unfortunately, given the current circumstances, we can't be. Now you can bring this to them, and you can bring this film, and you can bring this event, you can bring this game to their living room, to their mobile phone, and you can deliver what they expect without having to lose money or invest more money on it. And therefore, you don't have to choose anymore between red and blue. You can have both. And this is what we can contribute, and would be glad to take any questions. We would be glad to support anyone that wants to break the rules and do more with less. So thank you very much for your attention. It is very exciting to see the results we can bring, that we have brought to other customers, and we'll be very much excited to bring those benefits to you as well. So hope you get in touch. I would be glad to take any questions, and feel free to reach out to us after this webinar, and we would be glad to assist you and demonstrate these results. The important thing is that we can deliver this same level of results with your assets on your conditions, and we can work with you to demonstrate very quickly how to make it happen.
So are there any questions from the audience? You can type in your questions in the questions menu on your right-hand side. Meanwhile, I want to share this slide with you, because one of the key questions that we often receive from people is how accurate is the SSIMWAVE viewer score, because our technology is based on it. And SSIMWAVE is actually the only video quality metric to break through the 90% correlation with the subjective viewer experience scores. And we have proven this with tests with different video databases. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and find it under the Science of Seeing. So if there are no more questions, then we would close the webinar. Thank you all for attending. Please don't forget to visit our virtual booth at Connectech Asia and to follow us on our website. Also on our website, we have a new demo zone where you can see our no reference source validation solution, including the unique capability of banding detection. And also, if you're interested, we are looking for partners and resellers in Asia. So if you want, please get in touch with us. You can write to carlos@simwave.com. And that's all for today. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Connectech Asia. Bye.